and welcome to the Art of Decluttering podcast. I'm your host, Amy Revell, and today I'm really excited to have one of my new BFFs in the show with me. Dawn, welcome to the Art of Decluttering podcast.
Thank you so much. This is so fun to get to be on the other side of the world talking about decluttering, right?
It took us a little bit to get our time. Well, actually, I'm the one that gets very, very confused with international times. So you're in yesterday and the evening, and I'm in today and the
right.
We got there. Listeners, if you don't know Dawn, once I start giving you a bit of her intro, you will realize exactly who this voice is. Dawn is also known as the Minimal Mum, and she reaches like a bajillion people a month on all her socials. And Dawn, so many times people say to me, "Why don't you do more on YouTube?" I'm like, because other women have that covered.
Yeah.
And it's not my jam. Mm-hmm. Like, I can do it, but I don't get joy from it.
Yeah.
So I just send people to your channel and like, just watch what Dawn does, and you can kind of like Australianize it. And that's exactly what we do.
Yeah, I love that. What are some Australian adaptations that you need to make?
Oh, well, sometimes they we call it a bench, like the kitchen bench instead of a countertop.
Oh, interesting.
And so, in fact, maybe like 7 years ago, I did a whole podcast because we were reaching so many of in the US as a part of our audience. We did like a whole translation episode of like, when we say this, we mean that. When we say this, we mean that. Because so many people, like we talk about what you guys would call the trunk of your car.
Yep.
We call the boot.
Okay.
And so people like would literally send us messages on socials going, "Why would you put your donations in the boot? That seems like, why wouldn't you just put them in the car?" And we're like, oh.
That's awesome.
So it very easily gets lost in translation.
That's awesome.
So tell us a little bit more about you. You've got a beautiful, fun family who are on summer break at the moment.
Yeah.
Give us the Dawn story.
Yeah. So we have 4 kids, ages 9 through 14, and we've been minimalist for about 9 years now. It was right around our youngest was an infant. So that's kind of how I can keep track of it, how many years it's been. And I'll tell you what, Amy, so over the course of a year when we had 4 kids ages 4 and under, which what a blessing. I mean,
I was going to say just chaos, but blessing. Yes,
completely
blessing.
Chaotic. But also I was like living my dream life, right? I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. I want to have a big family. And I'm like, I have it. Like, I have it. I have the dream that I wanted. And I am so unhappy. And I feel like a failure as a mom, as a wife, housekeeper. Ugh. And so, I found out about minimalism and I started Googling it, and I was just like, I don't know if this is going to be the solution to my problem, but I was willing to give it a shot. And so over the course of a year, I got rid of, 80% of our stuff. And honestly, I didn't think I would have had to go that far to get our house to be very easy and manageable, where I felt like I could stay on top of it, where I really did feel like a good mom again. I was amazed how much stuff I actually had to get rid of to get to that point. But that was 9 years ago. We've not looked back. I've gone further. I would say now I've gotten rid of 85% of our stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
We just keep the bare minimum, and it's so fun. Like, I love these ages with our kids. We're busy, but like in a really good way, and it's fun and it's manageable. And I'm like, I don't feel like Hot Mess Express, right? Like I see other moms and, it's like, oh, it's just so chaotic, and oh, I forgot the snacks again and all this. And I'm like, let's not live that way. We don't have to live that way, right? And I was a very messy person before this. And so I just always want to be like, come here, guys. It's okay. We don't have to do this anymore this way,
Yeah. And you're possibly still doing a lot of the things. Like, yes, as minimalists, we often reduce our calendar clutter, but actually like we do the things, but without all the stress that goes with it. So we want to go out to basketball. My kids grab their one basketball jersey, their one pair of basketball shorts and a pair of basketball shoes, and we're out the door. They're not rummaging through washing baskets and Mum, did you wash this? And where I can't find my basketball.
Yeah.
Like, you actually, what you did is made all of the things simpler as well as the home simpler.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's very counterintuitive, right? Because moms wouldn't think like, well, I'm super busy. How would having one pair of basketball shorts help, right? Like, that's counterintuitive. I need 5. So they have one for each day of the week. Yeah. And you don't realize like, no, that actually forces us. We have to stay on top of the laundry. And guess what? My kids make sure it gets into the hamper. Do you call it a hamper? I don't know what you call it. When it's dirty, it goes in the hamper. So it gets through the wash, and they're very like protective of it. They know where it's at in the cycle. Like they know, okay, this has to be washed up. I'm going to wear it again tomorrow. Right. And so it like creates all this responsibility. We're not so careless with things. And like you said, I mean, we don't even own laundry baskets in our home because that was just an invitation for like chaos.
I love that. I really like that. I had a client recently who said to me, I just kept losing all my glasses. So now I have a pair in every room. And I said to her, and is it working? And she's like, well, not really. I said, so here's my challenge. I think if you just have one pair full stop, you'll stop losing your glasses. And she's like, that's ridiculous. I said, can you try it for a week?
Yeah.
She came back to me. She's like, okay, so I didn't lose my glasses. Because there's you don't have to have all of that going on in your head. And there's high motivation to track the one thing, not the 7 or 8 or however many we've got.
Totally.
I love that you don't have laundry baskets, Dawn. So
I wasn't responsible enough with them. You know, I'm like, I can't be trusted with them. Like, they just have to go, you know.
That's so good. So what we really want to nail, I was going to say nail your brain on, but I don't think that's the right terminology. What we want to mine your brain for today is around kind of that family, exactly what we're talking about. Like, what does minimalism look like when you embrace it as a family? Because minimalism, it just isn't about having less stuff or being less cluttered or being less busy. Like, it's also about boundaries. And like, I love the thought of it being about satisfaction because you genuinely do become more satisfied with less.
Yeah.
And so tell me a little bit about what that's played out within your family. Like, the kids were little when you started the journey. So they, you know, little ones are probably not like, hey, mum.
Yeah, they've been indoctrinated from a young age. Yeah.
What's that look like as they've gotten older and they start to be aware of brands, or they're watching what friends keep in their bedrooms? Like, what has that look like?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because I know there's a lot of fear for parents of, well, you know, now, I mean, the word trauma floats around everywhere, right? So it's like, oh, I'm going to traumatize my kids if they don't have all of the toys and the brand names and all that. So I was fortunate that we started when our kids were young, so they really don't know it differently. But there was a time when our girls were a little bit older and they went to a friend's house, and their friend had all the Barbie things and the Barbie dream house and all the accessories and all the furniture. And they came home and they were so excited to tell me about all of this stuff that their friends had in their room. And that was the first time where I was just really like, oh my goodness, have we gone too far? Because all of our toys fit very neatly into some IKEA like toy bins. Like, we did not have a lot of toy inventory. And I was just like, oh no, what have I done? So the next Christmas, I went on Marketplace, Facebook. Do you guys have Facebook Marketplace?
Oh, do we have Facebook Marketplace?
It's not a good thing. So I went on Marketplace. I found a used Barbie, you know, big Barbie mansion. I'm like
a dream house.
Dream house, right? And so, so we get it home, we give it to them for Christmas. Amy, they maybe played with it one time, two times tops. And I'm just like, what is going on here? You told me how wonderful this like dream house is and everything. And then I realized, you know what, Dawn, they might have just been making an observation. They maybe weren't envious or saying, I need that, Mom. But I think we sometimes get confused as parents, right? Similarly, Christmas morning, our kids open all these presents and they're so excited and they're so happy. And we think, okay, that's what a good Christmas is, right? Or a good birthday. But we have to look at the data after the day of opening and be like, oh, right, but they didn't play with it. It didn't make them content or happy. So there's a lot of deciphering, I think, as a parent, you know, walking through this. But ultimately, what I know now is that kids thrive in highly simplified spaces. And if you want to see their creativity come alive, take away all their toys. Kids don't actually need any toys at all. I mean, there's studies to support that. What you want to do is create an environment where they can be creative. They can do the creating. So we always kept very simple toys like Legos, Duplos, building blocks. Now, I mean, our kids even have Magna-Tiles. Now Magna-Tiles are kind of a thing. But, you know, those open-ended things where they're the ones creating, and lots of cardboard boxes, masking tape, and markers. Even I hate organizing craft supplies, like kids' craft supplies.
Oh, the worst.
Yeah. Like, they make a big mess and there's glitter and sequins. And I'm like, oh, feathers? What? Like, who, you know?
Do you hate feathers too?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, my team think it's so funny because I won't touch them. I'm like, that is the most disgusting thing that was ever created.
Right? Like, why? And then you realize they're just as happy, actually more happy, I feel like, with cardboard and masking tape and some markers. And I mean, I let my kids use scissors too, right? Even at a young age. But where they are creating, they are so happy and content and engaged, and they actually play together fairly well, pretty well. And they're not coming to me saying, I'm bored. I mean, they could literally work on this creation for hours and hours and then go back to the next day too. And so it makes me sad that, you know, in our culture, it's like toys, commercials everywhere selling all these things. And now it's like Montessori toys and learning toys and all. And it's like, our kids don't need any of that.
They need that stuff.
Yeah. So I do want to acknowledge it's very counterintuitive, but if you are willing to look at it as an experiment, box things up, you don't have to donate them or get rid of them right away. Just box them up, do an experiment and just test it out. I have yet to hear a mom that says like, oh no, they wanted all their toys back. Never, ever, ever.
No. And I think what it takes is you go from playing with toys that you kind of maybe role play at best. Otherwise, you just kind of do whatever the game tells you to do.
Yes.
And instead, you've got projects, and there's always room for more siblings or friends. Like I'm one of 5. We spent a lot of time outside climbing trees and doing all the things. We didn't have a heap of toys, but we were so creative, but we were also inclusive, and we learnt teamwork, and we learnt how to just entertain ourselves and come up with projects that literally lasted weeks.
Yeah.
Like no kid plays with a toy they got out of a box for weeks and weeks and weeks in this whole big project. Like you're taking away all of that learning.
Yes. And I do want to touch on too, I know a lot of families with neurodiverse kids now, they do have different attachments to their things. And so sometimes it's a little bit trickier, but this is where using, like I call it a time will tell box or bin, where you say, you know what, we're just going to pack away a few things. So, you know, with our kids, I could go into their room and backs up everything, and it's not gonna be a big deal. But if your kids have ADD, ADHD, autism, ODD, some of these other things, then we want to do it a little bit more slowly and let them know, like, we're gonna box up one box of things today. It's not going anywhere. We're just gonna test it out and see how it feels, and then gradually go through that process. So I know it's not always. I mean, most of us moms were like, I'm so over it. Get the boxes, like, let's go. But I do understand. Yeah, there are times where we have to go just a little bit slower pace with it.
And we work with a lot of families with kids with disabilities. And sometimes what I say to them is your kid might have a special interest in, you know, those bobblehead things that you can buy, or in Star Wars or in dinosaurs or whatever it is. That actually doesn't mean they need to have every single thing you can possibly afford and fit into their room of that category.
Right.
Just because they're super interested in it doesn't mean they need it all, because then it's overwhelming. And what you're also creating is a sense of, now I have to keep going. Like I've come this far and now I need to buy every new thing that comes out. Yeah. And you're not doing anyone any services.
Exactly. And we see that a lot with like Legos too. I mean, I know how Legos multiply, but it's all inventory that even our kids have to manage. And again, when the inventory is too much, then we're not seeing that just like beautiful creative play, right? Then it's all about managing the Legos and how, you know, and the big mess. And it is overwhelming. A book I like to recommend all the time, Simplicity Parenting. Are you familiar with that book?
Yes.
From John Payne. He's from Australia.
He's great.
Yeah. Fantastic. So that's a great book to help navigate this too.
Yeah, I'll pop that in the show notes as well. Is there any areas, Dawn, that when you did like the big cull, that 80% cull, that you then went, actually, we needed more of that? Because sometimes I say to clients, it's okay if you over declutter for the sake of all of the decluttering that you've done. Like if you go over by 5% and you've done 80, actually, you can be creative. You can make do, you can repurchase, you can borrow, you can. Did you have areas that you were like, oh, okay, so when people come over, I do need more than 5 teacups? Or were you like, actually, this is ridiculous. We're not missing anything.
Not missing a thing. It was incredible. I've heard it said, Gretchen Rubin had said, she's like, it's such a disproportionate payoff, like all the benefits of simplifying. And even if once in a while I'm like, oh, I could have used that extra cutting board or whatever, or pot holder, or like a trivet thing. I was like, oh, if I had another trivet to set out all these hot dishes, you know, and like, what do? You fold up a dish towel and stick it under it, right?
It's going to be fine. And
because the benefits are so good, like so good, even if I'm slightly inconvenienced once in a while, it's like, who cares? And it's almost that thing of like, You know, it kind of feels good though. Like it kind of like there is a cost to anything that has a benefit. And so it's okay. Like I'm a strong person. I'm creative. I can think of something else. So it's actually okay if I'm not always living 100% in comfort, right? Which again is very countercultural, but it's actually like one of those things where like, it's okay. Like I'm going to make it through.
I love it.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of a thrill. Like what did we do recently? Oh, we were serving up salads and I only have 2 salad bowls and we had like 3 or 4 salads. So I was like, okay. I went, a casserole dish. Is there a rule? Is the police going to turn up? Because I just used the casserole dish to serve a salad. No, they're not.
Yeah. No one came
by.
by.
There's this little bit of like, oh, I can do this. Like it reinforces you are a creative person. Your friends are not coming over because your salad bowls all match. They probably like you. That's probably why they're coming over.
Yeah. Isn't that just so fun? And every time we go camping, we like to go camping. I come back home and I'm like, I think I could get rid of even more, you know, like there's something so enjoyable about just having so little to manage. And especially because we live in such a busy, chaotic world. I'm not exactly sure how it is in Australia, but I hear it's kind of pretty the same. It's such a noisy world. And I think it's gotten that way so much, like so quickly. It's different than when even we were growing up, that I feel like it's never been more important that we have a calm, peaceful place to come home to and that our kids have that too. And so that's where we're prioritizing peace in our home. I'm like, okay, I need a space where my kids can be creative, where they can let their guard down, they can be at peace. Wow, that means they just really can't have much stuff in it, you know? And Amy, I'd be curious, like I hear from a lot of women now too that say, even like decor, things that in the past would have been enjoyable for them to look at. I see a lot of women now just like, it's too much. Like I just have to even like simplify that stuff.
Totally. I mean, I have one exclusion policy and that is on plants.
I see behind you. I love it.
During COVID, I got my first ever indoor plant because before that, I was like, I am concentrating on keeping 2 children alive. I will not take responsibility for anything else.
Yeah.
And then I got my first plant and now there's like 50 and oh my gosh, I get
so how it happens.
Joy from them. Oh, I love it so much.
Yeah.
But like picture frames and ornaments and like all of those bits and pieces.
Yeah. Sometimes do you call them knickknacks? Do you have knickknacks?
Yeah, knickknacks. And like you just, I don't know, that just must be like a worldwide way to describe the random stuff that we keep everywhere.
Totally. Yeah.
I'm interested to know, did you find that as your kids have gotten older and now they're kind of responsible for their own things a bit, have you seen personalities interact with minimalism in a different way?
Yeah, it's been fascinating. So we have 2 girls and then 2 boys. And so what's interesting in each like pair, there's one that's like really neat and tidy and the other one is like could not care less, right? And they share rooms. So it's like a neat and tidy person with a messy person in each pairing. And so we've had to navigate
experiment.
Yeah, no, totally, right? And my youngest, he is attached to everything. So I do understand this for the parents that say that too. And so we've had to navigate that, but it's been good. And we come up with just like some rules like, okay, the floor has to stay clean because I know clutter on the floor is very unsettling to our brains. And so I'm like, okay, for the sake of the neat and tidy person, if they were in their room by themselves, I'd kind of be like, you do you. But when it affects another person, I'm like, okay, the floor has to stay clear, right? Now, your side of the room, then for the messy person, like the rest of it, do it however you want, but the floor has to stay clean. And it's amazing how even just kind of that one like ground rule, no pun intended, how at least it never feels overwhelming, even though one side is generally like more messy. It still feels more contained, under control because the floor is clear. So I think we have to pick our battles sometimes as our kids get older and understand that, yes, they may likely keep their room a little bit differently than we would like, but I think we can still have some things like, okay, I have to be able to see the floor. And one of my favorite like tactics with that is to tell our kids, hey, if you pick it up, you can keep it. If I pick it up, I keep it. And
that's great.
It tells you how much value do they have for that thing. Because sometimes I will see something on the floor and I'm like, you pick that up or otherwise it's mine, you know? And they're like, meh. And I'm like, what? You just got that as a gift. That was your most special thing. Like what? You just made that a day ago. And they're like, meh. And I'm like, oh, wow. They don't have any value for it. And so I can't have more value for it than they do. I can't be in charge of all their stuff too. Right.
No.
And so then I pick it up. I donate it. I let it go.
Great.
And that is sometimes tricky for me as the parent, right? I'm like, we're getting rid of something perfectly good. And then I'm like, It's fine. If they
you
don't
can't get rid
care.
of that. Your grandma gave that to you
Yes.
only a week ago. And you're like, oh no, okay, that's just made up rules.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's a lot of times where they're willing to go further than I am. And I've had to be like, oh, okay, no, it's okay. I mean, I grew up here, like we did not have extra, right? And so like you kept everything, like everything was valuable. I protected my toys and my things. And so it's just so different now. And I don't want my kids to just be like, oh, who cares? Get rid of everything. Like not at all. But they are drowning in clutter and inventory. Like it's never been easier for them to get things too. And so I would rather have them have a looser grip on things than a tighter grip. And so if they want to let stuff go, then all right, like it can go.
Have you noticed the difference with Christmas and birthdays in what they want or what they're satisfied with? Or if they get money and they go to the shops, they're more intentional about what they purchase. Have you kind of seen that in this kind of pre-tween age for you?
Yes, they are. You know, I early on when they kind of started getting their own money or making purchases, I would let them make like mistakes or make like, I'd be like, oh, that's not a great purchase, right? We would go to the dollar store, you know, and then they would get stuff and it wouldn't last and it would break. And then I'd be like, hey, let's, what are we observing here? Right. Or something else like, you know, off Amazon. And I'm like, oh, I just don't know. And I'm like, you know what? They need to have that experience. And so I let them, and it was very painful sometimes because I'm like, oh, Corbin spent $80. I don't know what that would be in Australia on a remote control car. And it like broke like right away and it didn't have good reviews and, you know, and so, but I'm like, you have to experience that. And so now they are very savvy shoppers and they wait on things, they compare reviews and they're not so impulsive with it. And so it's something we practice as parents, but I do feel like, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, by having fewer things that they're managing and caring for, that they have much more value for things.
And they look after them more. I think that mentoring is so, so important. I speaking to a client yesterday who said, like, I never learned this as a kid, and my kids are now teenagers, and I'm freaking out because they've never learned any of these skills. And I was like, first of all, good news, this is all teachable. You don't have to be born with some gene that makes you minimal or organized or know how to declutter. But I love that you're like, now they can actually make wise choices because they've experienced it and you've mentored them on the way through it. My kids are almost at the point where it's annoying that they never want anything. Like, I'm like, so what do you want for birthday? Like, I kind of have everything I need. I'm like, do you want a new pair of basketball boots? They're like, oh, I already have some. I'm like, okay.
And on one hand, you're like, great job, Mom. Good job. And then the other, you're like, but I actually have to get you something, right? So
I want to get you something. Like, please help me out here. I was just going to make it up and you may not like it. What's been the greatest reward in it? Like as a family unit, what have you seen like as a unit? Because there's so much personally that we come away and go, oh my gosh, minimalism has changed everything. But what about the way you function all together?
I think it's just, because I'm not stressed all the time, I feel like I'm a better mom. And so then we all enjoy our time more. We get to just do things. We can think about going camping and traveling. And they're in like theater now, which is like very time consuming. But like, it's like we can just do it and enjoy it and not feel like it makes our, us so frantic. And so I feel like it has made being a mom so much better, family life so much better. It's not perfect. There's still, I was just for a second, I'm like, you probably can hear them fighting in the background, but maybe not. Good. So, it's just like, it's not perfect, but I feel like it is, you have to like learn new things with each age and stage, right? And I just feel like it's been a more enjoyable process. I feel like I have more bandwidth to invest into like, how are we going to navigate this, right? And I'm more level-headed. And so all around, I feel like it has just made family life more enjoyable. And again, disproportionate payoff, right? Like, I spent lots of hours for a year decluttering during nap time and sitting the kids in front of a TV show so that I could get some decluttering done. So I spent 1 year doing that. And now here we are 9 years later. And I feel like it just keeps getting better and better and better. And so it is such a path. I know it's a lot of work to declutter. And, especially if you don't feel supported or you have energy limitations or all those things, I understand it. But if you will continue to push through, it is the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, and I think it makes a really big difference. What you're saying is you spent a year doing it. Like people will call our company, they call professional organizers all over the world and they're like, so can you come in the next week and help me, become minimalist. And you're like, no, not even the TV shows with 50 behind the scenes stuff can do that.
Yeah.
And like that long-term investment means what you're creating is a really solid foundation.
Yes.
Because that's what then you can maintain it on. Because what we hear so often is people are on like this yo-yo diet of accumulation and discarding and accumulate. And that doesn't work. That is flipping exhausting.
Yes.
It's financially a really poor decision because you're going to be wasting so much money and feeling guilty about it. But when you go like, this is where I'm heading, like you don't learn to run in 3 hours because you go to a running track. Like you've got to actually put in the time. And I think a year is a really achievable thing, particularly when you've got little kids. Like, hello, you've got a million things to do.
Yes. But it's true. You develop this aversion to stuff, right? Because you're confronted with every wrong decision you've made. You know, you're just like, wish I could have the money back for that. Wish I could have the money back for that.
So
right?
much.
But it's good. Like it's painful at times, and sometimes you just have to take a break. But you continue to push through. It changes absolutely how you buy and consume and even accept free things, like all that. It's like, no, I can predict the future. I know what is going to happen, a month from now. So no, thank you.
And now I may be wrong, but tell me if I'm right. Are you currently living debt-free?
Yes.
Because I feel like it's a trademark of so many of us in this space.
Yes.
Because that was a goal for us. Like for my 40th birthday, we paid off our mortgage.
Yeah.
And so the freedom in that, like the minimalism is part of that.
Yes.
Because if I was always out buying an updated car, a new phone, every time a new phone, like tell me about what that process was like for you. Because debt-free is not just about the fact that you don't pay a mortgage. It's the fact that you get to say yes to the things where your values are.
Totally. I mean, so I think minimalism and decluttering helps you become content with what you have. And so then because why do we get into so much debt? Like you said, cars and clothes and trying to impress everybody, right? And so by decluttering, you're like, oh, then that didn't make me happy. That I thought that shirt was going to make me feel cool. It didn't. Lasted a week, And so I think the core to getting out of debt is finding contentment and being okay with the things that you have. So absolutely it goes hand in hand. But I often struggle because I'm like, which was more impactful, getting out of debt or decluttering? Because like both, I mean, the weight that is lifted off your shoulders when you don't have a mortgage payment, it's indescribable. I had no grit. I've talked to, I don't know if you know Christine from Frugal Fit Mom, but she talks a lot about budgeting and getting out of debt. I'm like, Christine, how do we describe to people how good this is? Like, how do we encourage them? She's like, I know I struggle too. She's like, it's infinitely better than I imagined that it would even be. And so now our family, like we've gotten to go on a mission trip a couple times, which has been so cool. We get to donate, we get to, and like you said, just do what we, if we want to travel, we can travel. And so just the freedom that it opened up. They're both so awesome. And I absolutely agree that they go hand in hand.
Yeah, because I don't think I've not yet seen someone become debt-free without also embracing quite an intentional level of minimalism. Because otherwise there is it's socially acceptable to be in debt, to have credit card debt, to have car debt, to have house debt, and house debt, I mean, particularly house debt because it's an asset. But like I say to people, your car is not an asset. It's not an asset. Your car is depreciating. It's not brave. Going up. Stop. And I know it's easier said than done. Like some, there's no blanket rule.
Yes.
But what we're doing is shining a little light and going, hey, the flow on effect, like you're talking about, hey, your family, like we love playing board games. The fact that the family can stop without a week's planning.
Yeah.
You can just play board games and not then go, now I have to stay up till 1 a.m. because I never tidied all the things.
Yes. Yeah. So good. Yes.
Okay. So just give me one last thing. What would your advice be to Dawn of 9 years ago or 10 years ago?
Oh my goodness. I would say rent a storage truck, fill it up, let it all go. None of it, if I could have told myself hey, a year from now, you're not going to care about any of this stuff. You're going to be so glad you got rid of it. I'll sometimes look back at video clips of things I've decluttered and gotten rid of. And I'm like, I don't remember any of that stuff. Very rarely. You get to a point where it's just it's really just stuff and they're making more of it every single day. So I would just tell myself go all in. Like go
Yeah.
all, especially if you are listening and you have little kids. Like if you do this now, oh my goodness, you're going to change everything. Like you change everything. If you have older kids, it's fine too. Like we do the best we can with the information we have at the time.
Exactly.
But, man, just go all in. You are not going to miss it. And we're so glad that you did.
Yeah. It is genuinely life-changing. Like genuinely life-changing, more so than a trip that you're going to take where you then come home with all the souvenirs or giving them like all this money that they can just go to the shops, and like this stuff will change every aspect of your life. It changes relationships. It changes your, you know, your ability to donate and give and invest and do the things you love. Like it's huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
Dawn, I want everyone to come and find you, particularly all your socials, but people go find Dawn on YouTube. Like if you just search The Minimal Mum, she will come up. And for everyone that's ever said, Amy, be more active on YouTube, no, because Dawn is doing it for you. Okay.
So
we all have our own gifts to the world. And you're very good at it. And so a client the other day sent me one of your videos and was like, do you do this? And I was like, yes, let's book it.
That's so good. Well, thank you. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you so much for being my guest. I've just loved getting to know how your family has worked, and that it's not just click your fingers and it's not perfect, but it is well and truly worth it. As you said, just do it. Go further than you think you could go. Box it all up. See what happens. I think you're going to enjoy it. Lovely. Until next week, Dawn, thank you so much. And everyone else, enjoy the freedom. I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people, who are the traditional custodians of the land this podcast is recorded on. I would also like to pay respects to their elders, both past and present, of the Kulin Nation, and extend that respect to other Indigenous Australians. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed today's episode, I would love you to rate and review the show on your podcast app. That will help others to find the Art of Decluttering podcast as well. If you'd like any more information, you can visit theartofdecluttering.com.au, and I would love to see you in my Facebook group. Just search the Art of Decluttering community on Facebook and join today. I hope that you have an incredible rest of your day and enjoy the freedom.